It takes you through the founding of the National Federation for Decency, what has become AFA. It's a call to stand firm for righteousness and shows how that resolve can make a huge difference in our world.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Find out more and watch the trailer at culturewarrior.movie.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning and happy Thursday, March 13th. So as DOGE on the federal level continues to show reckless and wasteful spending, a lot of red states, and it should be every state, right, are looking into even more of the potential fraud and waste that is being spent in their states. And a new report from Governor Ron DeSantis and also the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration released a very interesting report this week that is titled this: Florida releases updated hospital patient immigration status dashboard highlighting the cost of uncompensated care for illegal immigrants. And the total cost of care provided, according to this report, to illegal immigrants in Florida just for 2024 is nearly $660 million. This is based on admissions data collected for 2024, and it's estimated that total cost of care for illegal immigrants comprises that sum, and federally required Medicaid payments to hospitals for emergency care of illegal immigrants totaled $76.6 million in 2024, and a total of 67,000, more than that, 67,700 emergency room visits by patients who were illegally in the country. So joining me now to discuss all this and more is Senator Blaise Ingaglia from the great state of Florida. So good morning, sir. And, this report just shows the necessity of why transparency is so important. And not only does this show the waste that is being put on Florida taxpayers and, of course, taxpayers nationwide in their various states and on the federal government, but why we need border security and why we really do need mass deportation.
Yeah, good morning, Jenna. Thank you for having me again. You are 100% right. This is a byproduct of what we have seen over the last previous 4 years under the Biden administration. And look, quite frankly, this is what a lot of progressive Democrats want. And what people need to understand is that this is a tax on people that you're just not seeing, because when you have this uncompensated care to the tune of tens of millions and hundreds of millions and probably billions of dollars across the tens of billion dollars across the United States, that compensated care is technically going to be compensated, but we're going to pay for it in insurance premiums. So whether we are paying it directly through our taxes or through higher insurance premiums, we are paying the cost, the full freight of illegal immigration. And this specific report was commissioned by me in a bill that I passed a couple of years ago, Senate Bill 1718, which is probably one of the strongest state-led anti-illegal immigration bills ever passed. We said, hey, we know that this is happening, so we mandated the hospitals that received Medicaid, which is a state federal partnership, which is pretty much every hospital, that you have to start asking the questions, are you here legally or illegally, and start collecting the data. Now, they can't deny people care because of the federal law, but at least we can get the information and have it more transparent of how much money is being spent on illegal aliens in our country.
Yeah, and this makes so much sense that we have this data just so that then we can have good legislation around this. And you're right that this is a burden on taxpayers and it's a burden on citizens because this is uncompensated care. I mean, so this isn't just people who are here illegally and somehow have their own health insurance or provide for themselves. I mean, this is something that's coming directly out of the pocket of the Florida state budget because it's uncompensated, correct?
Correct. That's 100% right. And it's a little bit more nefarious, Jen, if you think about it this way. So we know that a lot of illegal immigrants come over, and there's a big argument in Capitol Hill in the Constitution about when someone is born on U.S. soil, they become a U.S. citizen. But what people don't realize is that about 95% of all the illegal immigrants that give birth to someone in the United States when they become, U.S. citizens, is that it's paid for by Medicaid. So we literally are paying with our tax dollars for the citizenship under the current Constitution. Hopefully we can amend that and change that later. We're paying for their citizenship through tax dollars. So that's another incentive that we really need to start taking away from illegal immigrants coming over.
Yeah, I'm speaking with Senator Blaise Ingaglia this morning from the great state of Florida, my home state. And, there was recently in the special term a kind of an argument, I think, on the side of the legislature who really didn't want to pass as much of a rigorous immigration bill as the governor wanted. And now that Florida is back in their regular session, how does the legislature plan to address some of these issues, and are they going to tackle some of these things like another illegal immigration or strengthening the border type of bill, or what comes out next out of this report when obviously Medicaid is controlled at the federal level, and I know that the Republicans there are looking at that, and of course the Democrats are suggesting, you can't cut Medicaid, and DOJ is unconstitutional, all those ridiculous arguments. But where can Florida step in?
Well, I wish Florida would continue to step in. Unfortunately, I don't think any more anti-illegal immigration bills are going to be heard. I put up the bill, a very, very strong bill that basically sets E-Verify level at zero. Basically, everyone in the state who's in every business in the state has to use E-Verify for every employee. But I actually made it tougher because we know, and we've seen, Jenny, you've seen it on TV, these horrible reports about illegal immigrants in our communities committing crimes, rapes, murders, stuff like that, injuring people in car wrecks, driving drunk on our roads. I actually think businesses should be held accountable. So if you're a business and you hire an illegal immigrant and that illegal immigrant goes out and rapes or kills somebody, the family of the person should be able to sue the business for damages because they were the ones who brought them over. So I forwarded that, and there was a bunch of other stuff in the bill that would severely crack down. What I proposed was a zero tolerance law on illegal immigration, and unfortunately it's not going to be heard. It's probably dead this session. But look, it's very frustrating, and I think it's a travesty, especially in the state of Florida. We have a supermajority. So there's a reason why we have that many people elected. Is because people like the way we govern, and we're aggressive. So if we're not being aggressive as possible, then I think we're doing a disservice to the people of the state of Florida.
Amen to that. Absolutely. I mean, I'm one of them that loved the Republican supermajority and the governor's leadership here enough to move here. And I know that so many others are the same. That, I came from a unfortunately pretty blue state that used to be a red state in Colorado, and came here because I wanted the conservative values that the legislature is promising through that supermajority. So I'm glad that there are fighters like you that are continuing to want to be aggressive. And one of the other things that you've been advocating for, Senator Ingaglia, is changing the way that Florida does constitutional amendments via petition. So basically stopping corporations from buying changes to the Constitution like we saw in the last election with Amendment 3 in particular, with attempting to have a constitutional amendment to legalize marijuana, but really it was only in the special interests of a specific Canadian corporation. So what are you in the legislature looking at doing as far as that change?
Yeah, we really need to crack down the way we do citizen initiative petitions to change our Constitution. It is becoming way too easy. There is foreign influence in our elections. And the thought, like the way it happens right now, is basically somebody hangs out on a street corner, says, hey, do you want to sign a petition for legalized marijuana in the state of Florida? And they're like, sure, let me sign it. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, you have 850,000, whatever the signatures are to get it on the ballot. But what we've seen, to your point, is that these large corporations, these well-funded large corporations, that corporation that you spoke of, I think spent about $125 million to change our Constitution to effectively give itself a monopoly on the marijuana market. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. That is stuff that's supposed to be legislated. And here's the problem with these, and you've seen it personally. I know you have seen it on Amendment 4 with the abortion amendment. Is both of those constitutional amendments were very poorly crafted. When we go through the legislative process, our bills are heard in committee, and each committee that we hear it in, we usually amend the bill because we find problems with the bill or unintended consequences. So by the time it gets to the floor, we vote on it, goes to the governor's desk, we've usually buttoned it up with these constitutional amendments that are now being funded by petition and outside corporations. They're poorly drafted. Amendment 4, they didn't have a definition for healthcare provider, and they were basically maligning our current law. So when we crack down on this, we're trying to change it where put the power in the citizens, where you can have a petition, but it's going to be up to the petitionee, the person who signs it, to get it back into our supervisor elections to see if it makes the ballot. Right now, what we've seen last election cycle was there were massive amounts of fraud. People were indicted over faking petitions to change our Constitution. So we need to do two things. We need to get the foreign influence out of our lawmaking, our elections, and our constitutional process, amendment process. And we need to make sure that the people who are actually signing the petitions are who they are, and they know what they're signing up for in order to change the Constitution, because right now they don't know that.
Yeah, and this just makes so much sense that if we are truly a government of the people, by the people, for the people, then citizens should know what exactly they're signing up for. And this is the problem really with citizen-led petitions that bypass the state legislature. I have a problem with that in general in a constitutional republic. I mean, the whole point of the legislature is that they should be, in my view, the only body that makes law. And if you want to have something change to the law or the Constitution, it should properly go through the legislature. I mean, I disagree with citizen petitions in general, but if we're going to have them, then it needs to be a better and more transparent process. And I saw another report, Senator, that was talking about another potential change where, and I don't know if this was coming through the legislature, that was trying to put basically a cap on the executive agencies commenting about the law and clarifying the law, because what we saw also through particularly Amendment 4 was that some of these executive agencies were going on their social media account and clarifying why a lot of the propaganda around it was just quite simply false. And it's utterly ridiculous to think that our own government agencies can't clarify to voters what the law is and how they may be misled. I mean, that's not for or against a petition. That's just saying, please be informed about the truth.
Jenna, I am so glad that you brought that up, because that has been aggravating me. I am on the side of these agencies because what I think they did was do a service, specifically Amendment 4. They were basically saying that, and I don't know if I'm quoting the ad exactly, but they were saying something like Florida's cruel 6-week abortion ban that doesn't have any exceptions, right? It's the part that had no exceptions in there that really bothered everyone. There were exceptions in current law, and if that amendment would have failed, which it did, those ads left the impression of the current law, which wasn't accurate, which probably would have and was risking people's lives. So to your point, I think there's a duty on behalf of government to let everyone know exactly what current law is so they can make a better decision, because these marketing campaigns for these ads are nothing more than that. They're marketing campaigns. They're trying to make you buy something, and what they're trying to make you buy is their BS, pardon my French. And in the absence of agencies and the governor pushing back and letting everybody know what current law is, then they take those ads as gospel, and they're not accurate, and it hurts people's lives. So I'm so happy that you brought that up, because that is one thing that has been frustrating me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like that would be doing such a disservice to voters to not allow our own government to clarify what the law is. And all we're doing then is seeing the propaganda from special interests. And yet it's supposedly because, oh, well, the government shouldn't be able to weigh in on ballot petitions. Well, it's not weighing in. It's not saying for or against. I mean, obviously, Governor DeSantis was very much against Amendment 4, and I think that's okay for him to express that. But for some of these other agencies to simply clarify and to tell voters, here's what you're actually voting on. There was so much misinformation around Amendment 4, and I personally know several of my friends here in Florida who initially believed one thing about Amendment 4, and then once it was clarified, they changed their position and said, "Oh, well, I definitely don't want that. I'm glad that I understand the truth about this," and that is likely the only reason that it failed. And
That's right.
and so, so moving forward, I mean, obviously, the only reason that you wouldn't have clarification is if somebody wanted to hoodwink the voters. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is they want people to buy the propaganda.
That's right. And look, I would be the first one to tell you and advocate against a sitting governor or an agency for expressly advocating for or the defeat of an amendment. That would be political speech, which the government should not be engaging in. But to set the record straight, I think there's a duty for us to do that. Now, let's think of the converse. Let's say that Florida's government did not come out and try to set the record straight. And both of the amendments were actually passed based upon misinformation. Well, now it's in our Constitution. Now we cannot go in legislatively and try to fix what they broke with our Constitution. We're stuck with it unless we can put another competing constitutional amendment on there. So it was a dangerous game that the backers of Amendment 3 and Amendment 4 were playing. Fortunately, the good guys won, but I have a sneaking suspicion this fight is not over. We're going to continue these fights.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to take a break here. And Blaise Ngoglia, Senator from the great state of Florida, thank you so much for your commentary on this and for fighting the good fight, because, these things are so important. And for everyone listening, even if you don't live in the state of Florida, this is why understanding ballot petitions in your state, if they're available, what's actually going on, clarifying what the law is, understanding the way that you're voting is so important. And we need to be informed voters. And we need to also be engaged all year round. I mean, this isn't just about exercising our vote, once a year or, once every 4 years during a presidential election cycle or something like that. We need to understand what's going on in our individual states, stay involved. This is why you should be following your members of the state legislature on social media. If you have social media, they give a lot of really good information, like at GovGoneWild, which is Senator Ngoglia's handle. I love it. But we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Do you believe in the absolute inerrancy of God's holy word? Do you believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to radically change lives and empower us to live like Christ? At Wesley Biblical Seminary, we believe God is raising up a movement of people across our nation and across the world who hold fast to the authority of the Bible and the hope of holiness. We are working today to equip tomorrow's pastors and Christian leaders through biblical and theological education and practical ministry that's accredited, affordable, online, and highly personal. Our programs include undergraduate, master's, and doctoral degrees, certificate programs, and even training for lay people. So whatever your next step is in being equipped for ministry, we're here for you. And if you believe these are the kinds of pastors we need leading our churches in the future, we invite you to learn more about partnering with us through giving. Learn more about Wesley Biblical Seminary by visiting us at wbs.edu today.
The words you are about to hear are taken from letters sent in by members of the Trinity Debt Management Program.
Dear Trinity, today I'm making my final credit card payment.
Before I came to you, I was in a constant state of anxiety and panic, but now there is hope for my family's financial future.
Working with Trinity made me understand that I'm not alone.
You really do help people.
Your kindness will never be forgotten.
Without Trinity's support, I would not have achieved my lifelong goal of becoming debt-free. free.
We saved a lot on interest and penalties, of course, but the reward was the gift of human kindness.
Trinity has carried me through a very difficult time in my life. You're amazing.
I used to feel so anxious and hopeless. Now I feel grace and peace.
God bless Trinity as you continue to help others become debt-free.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Stern. Stand by for news and commentary next. The man leading anti-American protest at Columbia University is part of a group fighting for the total eradication of Western civilization. Mahmoud Khalil is now in U.S. custody, is expected to be deported. Democrats are enraged. They say the foreign national has a constitutional right to protest America on American soil. Yeah, well, Mr. Khalil has a right to protest in his home country, and soon he will be able to do just that. President Trump, writing on Truth Social, said we will find, apprehend, and deport these terrorist sympathizers from our country, never to return again. House Speaker Mike Johnson doubled down on the president's threat, saying anyone here on a student visa who wants to prey upon Jewish classmates will be sent home. Many Americans have been denied scholarships because of foreign nationals, turned away from universities to make room for the foreign nationals, and now it's time to put American students first. I'm Todd Stearns.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, speaking of my former home state of Colorado, the U.S. Supreme Court has taken up a challenge to Colorado's ban on quote-unquote conversion therapy. So this is Childs v. Salazar et al. And the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals addressed a challenge to Colorado's minor conversion therapy law, which prohibits licensed mental health professionals from practicing so-called conversion therapy on minors. And so the issue presented, according to the docket, is whether a law that censors certain conversations between counselors and their clients based on the viewpoints expressed regulates conduct or violates the free speech clause of the First Amendment. So this is a really big deal. I am old enough to remember when I was back in Colorado and participating in a lot of the legislative discussions there and testifying on behalf of other organizations that I previously worked for in the state of Colorado. The whole issue was basically whether Christian counselors could encourage minors to religious viewpoints, to say, well, if you are having feelings of homosexuality, for example, then you can follow a biblical path, and basically counseling them according to Scripture. And if you are a licensed mental health professional in Colorado, somehow they believe, in the state of Colorado, and apparently the 10th Circuit agrees, that they can regulate that conduct and basically quell religious speech in the setting of a licensed mental health provider, rather than saying, well, no, if parents are sending their children specifically to a Christian counselor, they should be able to get Christian-based therapy. So let's talk to our next guest, Mike Donnelly, who is a law professor and attorney, and no stranger to all of the politics going on in Colorado. So, Mike, this is a really important case for the U.S. Supreme Court to address, because I think that this really bears on the freedom of the individual counselor to determine what is best to counsel to their own clients without having this so-called conversion therapy ban.
It is a really interesting and important case, Jenna, and it's always great to be with you, and good morning to all of your listeners today. Great day today. Let's talk about this a little bit. So this is the counselor bringing a case saying, hey, I have a right to speak, and I believe they're being represented by ADF,
Yes.
Alliance Defending Freedom, great Christian legal organization. And this is in a preliminary injunction stage also, so it hasn't been to trial yet. And the district court refused to issue a preliminary injunction stopping the enforcement of the so-called minor conversion therapy law. The 10th Circuit agreed. There was some argument there, which you just described, about how it's, the 10th Circuit said, look, this is a content-based regulation. A regulation of professional conduct. And the court said, yes, the state of Colorado can regulate the mental health profession, and this conduct can be regulated. And the dissent said, well, no, hold on, this is not conduct regulation, this is content regulation. This is the government getting involved, as you pointed out, interfering with the counselor's ability to do their job based on what they believe is best for their patient. And the state of Colorado has said, well, we are going to use our authority to regulate the medical profession and say that this particular therapy, and we need to talk about this therapy because this is Orwellian, this quote unquote conversion therapy ban. It's Orwellian. We've got to unpack this for people. And what the Colorado said, we're not going to allow this. We're not going to allow counselors to help gender confused kids understand their biological reality. That's what the state of Colorado said. Okay.
Which is par for the course in Colorado.
All over the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Colorado's ground zero for this stuff. It's just crazy. But look, can we talk about this conversion therapy? Because I think this is ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I want to
conversion therapy.
Yeah, because I want to point out, I mean, when people are understanding this, I mean, the logical question, and I think the logical pushback, we say, well, wait a minute, you want the state to be able to regulate doctors from performing gender reassignment, quote unquote, surgery on minors. So how is this any different to regulate the content of a so-called conversion therapy ban? And why aren't conservatives being consistent? So I think it is important to unpack that and to show that distinction. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a really nice framing there. So advocates of gender ideology, people who think that children can choose to be the opposite sex of what they were created to be, people who advocate for that, they call this therapy where a parent brings a child who's confused and thinks, oh, I'm a boy, but I want to be a girl, or I'm a girl, I want to be a boy, brings that child to a counselor and says, my child is confused. Can you please help them understand the biological reality that God made them a boy or God made them a girl, and that's okay, and that there are two sexes, and this is like normal, right? But people who want to encourage kids to be confused, they call it conversion therapy, as if somehow helping a child think through that they were born a boy is converting them from being what they think they might want to be, a girl, back to being a boy. It flips truth and reality on its head. And this is what the left does all across their issue set, is they use language to confuse people. Because, conversion therapy, oh my goodness, it sounds bad to convert people from something that they want to be to something that they are, right? That's what the thinking is. And so I think we have to really unpack the language and understand what's going on here. But that is what this was all about. And so the court in 10th Circuit said, look, we're not going to interfere here and issue a preliminary injunction. And the Supreme Court took it. And I think I feel like this should be a pretty straightforward 6-3 win for ADF, sending it back to the court and say, look, you've got to think about issuing a preliminary injunction here, because preventing counselors from helping kids when their parents bring them there for help, that is a significant harm. And I think it's an irreparable harm. And so I think that ADF and the counselor here should win at the Supreme Court, and they should get a preliminary injunction stopping this law from being enforced against counselors in Colorado.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. And you're absolutely right, Mike Donnelly, that this is how the left addresses their issue set, is that they always use terminology that is purposefully imprecise. And I don't think that it is a coincidence that even the term conversion has a religious overtone, because when we talk about, conversion, and obviously they're targeting mostly Christian counselors or people who have the worldview that says boys are boys and girls are girls, and you can't change that because it's based in biology. I mean, we don't even need to be Christians to observe that just scientifically and empirically within the reality that we live in. And so it isn't really a religious issue from a scientific perspective. It is a worldview issue, of course, but to use that term conversion, I think, is trying to put this so-called conversion therapy into the realm of religious conduct, which, of course, then is always the left's view that science and religion are somehow incompatible, when really it's the left's religion of the trans movement that is incompatible with reality. And so why do you think, though, that this would be a 6-3 decision, just in terms of the current composition of the Supreme Court? I mean, I'm having a little bit of a skeptical time over here, thinking that, you know, somebody like a Roberts will be on board with this, and maybe because it deals with minors. But then we also have, you know, Gorsuch, who wrote the Bostock opinion, that's saying, you know, that sex includes sexual orientation, gender identity. Maybe he's recontemplating that, but this should be a 9-0 if we're honest. I mean, if, you know, but obviously that's not going to happen, right? So what's your view on why this may be a 6-3?
Well, I think Bostock was different. I mean, you were talking about adults there. We are talking about minors here. And there are some complicated questions here. There's some interesting questions here because the framing of the case is a free speech case, basically. And you know, and I kind of wonder why it's, you know, this wasn't framed as a parents' rights case. Because to me, parents have a fundamental right to direct their children's education, upbringing, as well as their health care. That's not in this case. This is all about the counselor's freedom to speak. And so in some ways it makes it a little bit more challenging because, you know, on one hand, the state does have the authority to regulate medical conduct. And so, you know, drawing that line could be challenging, but we've got minors involved here. So, I mean, Gorsuch on Bostock was, you know, a problem. Let's hope he's recontemplating that, but this is a different case. I think when you go back and you look at Roberts, I think Roberts is going to clearly be on the side of ADF on this one. I mean, when you go back, you need to link this case back to Obergefell also, and Justice Kennedy, and frankly, I blame all of this on Justice Kennedy. Mm-hmm. It's Justice Kennedy's fault, former Justice Kennedy's fault, that we're having these conversations today. Because if you go back to the very beginning of his tenure, going back to his early homosexual rights cases, he's the one, and parents' rights cases, even back in Romer v. Evans in Colorado. It was not a Colorado case on parental rights, amazingly. And he's been the one who's putting his thumb on the scale on the culture wars from the very beginning. And he is the one who has validated these legal arguments and resulting in Obergefell, which sort of opened the door to the whole LGBT rights agenda in a very significant way across the country, invalidating 31 states' constitutional amendments recognizing marriages between a man and a woman, right? You know, this is where we opened the door, the Pandora's box. You know, if two people can marry, then if a man and a man can marry, then what difference does sex have in anything? And so you saw from that decision from Obergefell, that's when the whole so-called transgender movement really started to blossom. And now 8-9 years later, going on 10 years later, we're dealing with the outgrowth of that.
Well, so let me ask you this.
Roberts, in that case, was strongly on the side of marriage as being a man and a woman. So I think these are related. So
yeah, in his dissent, and that's a really good argument. I hope you're right on that, Mike Donnelly. Let me ask you this with our time remaining. So where is our best argument when we're drawing the line? Obviously, for parental rights, and as you said, you know, the right of parents to direct their child's upbringing, make health decisions, their best interests and safety. I mean, we know that is a parental rights issue. But then on the other hand, saying, well, but parents can't choose to give hormones to children to change try to change their gender, which is impossible, but, you know, to try to convert them hormonally or through these so-called gender reassignment surgeries, and we want the government to step in and prevent that, then doesn't it seem like because I could see this being a question at the Supreme Court, doesn't it seem like all you're doing is wanting to advance one worldview when what we're addressing legally is saying that on one hand, the government can't step in and entangle the rights of parents or tell health professionals what to do. But then on the other side, we're saying, but we want them to step in and tell some parents and some hospitals what they can and can't do.
That's probably one of the reasons ADF brought this case in its very narrow framing as a counselor's free speech rights and maybe decided not to bring a parents' rights case. I think the parents' rights argument is stronger, although it does cut both ways to your point. So in the area of gender reassignment surgeries, so-called gender reassignment surgeries, and medical interventions, hormonal treatments, you're talking about physical interventions into a minor that radically harms them, okay? It is harm. The state has an absolute interest in protecting children from physical harm, okay? And so I think there is a categorical difference between talk therapy from a therapist to help kids get comfortable with who they were born to be and preventing parents from cutting off parts of their kids or giving them hormones that will harm them permanently forever. And so the government absolutely, I think, has a right to step in there. The other important thing to recognize when you bring a parents' rights case versus this First Amendment case in Salazar is under Salazar, the case we're talking about in Colorado, the court said that they would apply rational basis, scrutiny, which is what Kennedy did in Obergefell also. So it wasn't a very significant level of scrutiny, which means the counselor lost. Okay, the court said, no, it's not a fundamental right for a counselor to be able to engage in a certain kind of therapy because the state can control that. And so we're going to apply a lower level of scrutiny. If you bring a parents' rights case, now it cuts both ways to your point, because a parent who wants the child to be converted, could say, well, I have a right to do this to my child. And then the state has to say, well, hold on, no, that's harm. So that overcomes the burden. Because when you're talking parents' rights, it's a higher level of scrutiny. The state has to have a compelling interest in regulating and has to be narrowly tailored. So I think it is complicated in that regard, but we'll see how this plays out with the free speech case. And there's always time to bring a parents' rights case if necessary.
Yeah, and Mike Donnelly, I mean, this is exactly why we need to have consistency in our definitions, for example, of harm in the law. I mean, and what reality presents in the law.
That's
because
right.
if we start making all of these legal precedent based on a fiction, like that we can redefine marriage as between one man and one woman, or that we can say that, we can commoditize children, for example, and it's perfectly fine to rent out wombs or use, IVF treatments in ways that are clearly antithetical to natural law. Or we suggest that yes, it's perfectly valid for parents to provide their children hormones or inflict permanent harm, but that parents can't make decisions to protect their children from harm. Then we get into this post-truth landscape that we're seeing in legal precedent. And so this is why the law always has to come back and reflect reality, and why true justice is predicated on a truthful definition of natural law, the laws of nature and of nature's God, and our rights have to be pre-political. And that's what our founders recognized, and we have strayed so far from that. And I hope that with our current composition of the Supreme Court, that we will start to wind this back, and we'll get some of these precedents that respect and acknowledge that, where we, instead of, as one person described it so aptly, I think, former Justice Kennedy's opinion in Obergefell was just a Hallmark love letter, but it wasn't anything grounded in truth or legal precedent, and certainly not the U.S. Constitution. So thanks so much, Mike Donnelly. We got to take a break here, but I so
Always
appreciate...
Great to be with you, Jenna.
Yeah, thanks so much, and I so appreciate your explanation of this. And we need to be praying for everyone listening. We need to be praying for the U.S. Supreme Court to do the right thing, even at this initial stage in this case, because cases like this are only here because this is the natural consequence of really bad precedent at its inception, like Obergefell, that has its roots all the way back in the sexual revolution. You can read my op-ed about a month ago in the Washington Times talking about the outflow of the sexual revolution. And I also talk about this in my book, The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution. If we want to fight for truth, we have to go back and see where we got off course. We need to course correct and come back to objective truth, morality, and the biblical worldview of the law. Natural law, it's where it's at. All right, we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
This is Jan Markell with Understanding the Times Radio. Won't you join me this weekend as I help you understand the times, contend for the faith, and become a watchman on the wall? I hope you'll join me each week as we do that together, right here on Understanding the Times Radio.
Saturday afternoon at 1 Central and Sunday afternoon at noon Central on American Family Radio.
Hello, I'm Sam Rohr, president of the American Pastors Network, a growing national network of pastors committed to the authority of Scripture and preaching the whole counsel of God. We believe biblical obedience is the foundation for revival, and impacting our culture for Christ is our duty. For too long, the pulpits of America have been silent on the important issues such as marriage and family and assault on our liberty. Join us in the battle for truth on Stand in the Gap weekend, Sunday evenings at 6 p.m. on American Family Radio, and visit us at AmericanPastorsNetwork.org.
Let's see, if something costs less, a lot less, but people are actually happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's MediShare. Maybe you've heard joining MediShare can save you or your family up to $500 a month, and that's huge, but it's also true. People are just happier with it. They love being part of something that reflects and promotes their values and what they believe in. MediShare works, too. It's been around for 30 years now, and members have shared more than $7 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network, so yeah, really, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care, whether you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan that you're happy with. Here you go. You can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes, a very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. It's 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE, 833-44-BIBLE.
Share-a-thon is coming.
I learned of American Family Radio via an angel visitation many years ago. I was sitting in my car on a summer afternoon with the windows open, eating my lunch and listening to Rush Limbaugh. This woman came to my open window. I had never seen her before. I have never seen her since. She asked what I was listening to, and I said, Rush Limbaugh. And she said, let me tell you about something else you may like. And she told me about our local station for American Family Radio. And I said, I'm going to turn to that right now so I won't forget. And I did. I've been listening ever since.
Did we inspire you? Did we encourage you? Or did we help change your life for eternity? Call 877-876-8893. Leave a 1 or 2 minute message and then be listening April 8th through 10th during Share-a-thon. And thank you for listening to American Family Radio. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And as we're talking about natural law and the foundation of our country and these broader worldview questions, Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire posted this on X recently. According to the left, our country's identity has nothing to do with religion, ethnicity, tradition, borders, or laws. So then what is our country? What does it mean to be an American? What is our identity? They can't answer. It's the what is a woman problem all over again. So maybe we need to be asking the question, what is an American? What does it mean to be part of a country with laws, with a national identity, with borders, and with a common interest? So joining me now to discuss is Orrin McIntyre, an author and host at The Blaze. And Orrin, this obviously is a much bigger question than only about the 10 minutes we have time for. But let's at least initially broach the topic, because I think this is so important when we're talking about coming back to our roots and our foundation, and we talk about the broader construct of conservatism and the ideology that our law should be based upon. So what does it mean to be an American? And good morning.
Hello, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me okay? And did you hear the question?
I'm sorry. It cut off the last minute or so there when it tried to switch me over.
Oh, sorry about that. Well, I was just, getting into the whole question of what it means to be an American, and, talking about this in the broader context of natural law and our legal precedent. And as Matt Walsh had posted on X and social media. He says this: according to the left, our country's identity has nothing to do with religion, ethnicity, tradition, borders, or laws. So then what is our country? What does it mean to be an American? What is our identity? They can't answer. It's the what is a woman problem all over again. And so the question, I think, is we're starting to have these clear delineations between the leftist worldview and the conservative worldview that wants concrete answers to this, wants to go along with natural law. We have to come back to this question: what does it mean to be an American and have a nation of borders and laws and a common interest? So in your view, Aaron, how do we answer that? What does it mean to be an American?
Well, the context for Walsh putting out this tweet was that there was a viral YouTube video where a young woman was debating with Sam Cedar, who's a leftist pundit, and she was saying that America obviously has a European and Christian background, that these are the foundations of the American identity, and that other people are allowed to come to the United States and able to assimilate to that, but there has to be a dominant culture. There has to be a American identity that people can look at, see, recognize as something that is core to our nation. And that's what got all this backlash. And to be fair, it's not just the left that's having this problem. I've seen a lot of right-wingers who are running around with this as well, saying, well, the United States is just this propositional nation. There's like 3 things you got to agree with. Once you agree with them, you're an American. That's it. But that's not really the way that the Founding Fathers understood American identity. That's not the way that conservatives have understood identity through time. I think that the one that was offered is relatively accurate. You know, Samuel Huntington, a professor who was at Harvard, somebody who taught people like Francis Fukuyama, he wrote a book called Who Are We? And in that book, he laid out that ultimately the United States is Anglo and Protestant, that these are the 2 core pillars of American identity. And again, Huntington's a guy on the center left. He didn't think that you had to be just Anglo or just Protestant, but he said that those things helped to define who Americans were. It was the core identity to which all new additions would assimilate. And so ultimately, even though there are many variations on that theme, those are the 2 core pillars that really help to center the American identity: the Christian faith, particularly of Protestant extraction, and the Anglo understanding of law and order.
And yeah, really well said. And I think that America is built on a worldview, not just the physical land. I mean, obviously, a nation physically has to have borders, and we need to have sovereignty around a physical space. I mean, that's like if I were to say my household, that is something that is an idea, and as well as a concrete, physical boundaries of my home and my space. And so when we're talking about what it means to be an American, it is a worldview, and it is something that especially people who want to come into this country need to assimilate to. They need to agree with our fundamental proposition as articulated originally in the Declaration of Independence, and then how our Constitution is established to continue to provide protection for our natural rights that come from God, our Creator, through our system of government. And we've strayed so far from that, Orrin, where even, as you mentioned, even people on the so-called right, I think, are confusing this a little bit, and they're wanting to make this more subjective than the reality of natural law allows.
Well, ultimately, like you said, every nation is both a combination of traditions, folk ways, religion, language, the culture, the things that you're discussing when you discuss worldview, but it's also a continuation. It's a place, it's a people, it's a heritage. It's both of these things, which again is what our founding fathers recognized. If you look at the Declaration of Independence, if you look at the Constitution and its preamble, you'll see that it's a declaration of principles, but who is it promised to? To ourselves and to our posterity. If you look at John Jay writing in the Federalist Papers, I think it's Federalist 2 or 3, John Jay says, that we are blessed that God has given us one continuous nation, speaking one continuous tongue, having a shared heritage, having a shared religion, having a shared tradition. These are all factors that add in. And of course, the beauty of the American understanding is that people can be woven into this, they can join this, but they ultimately have to recognize the core building blocks of what America is. And this is what helps, I think, eventually, if we move away from this idea of the nation and the state being the same thing. America is a people. We are people living in a place, sharing a tradition. And then we also have a government, and that government should serve our people. It should serve our nation, but the nation and the government are not the same thing. So it's important that we share the same governing principles, but governing principles cannot themselves create a nation. A nation is something much deeper and I think more spiritual beyond just words on paper.
Yeah, so well said, Orrin McIntyre, and this is why our founders recognize that our Constitution is only appropriate and only made for a moral and upright people, and it's inadequate to govern any other, because we know that eventually the government will run out of ways to restrain evil if the people themselves want to be so evil that we just don't even care about government and its limitations. And, you mentioned the preamble and a declaration of principle. And this is why definitions matter. Like I was speaking with Mike Donnelly in the last segment, and how the left and their worldview wants to redefine these core terms so that the values that they want us to perceive that are American, or that they want us to continue to advocate for, are actually different and twisted, really, and perverted, rather than being centered on objective moral truth that comes from something outside of ourselves, which can only be God. And so there's either God's view or man's subjective view, and you either have objective or subjective. And so when we talk about things like establishing justice, forming a more perfect union, providing for the common defense, securing the blessings of liberty. I mean, these things aren't just, well, whatever it happens to mean to you to establish justice, just like the left will say, well, that means social justice. Well, no, it doesn't, because these terms, as terms of art in a legal document, should have concrete meaning. And if we are going to protect our nation into the future, we have to continue to provide correct definitions.
Well, and that's, again, where that tradition is so critical, right? The way that we know that we are using the same shared definitions is that we share the same tradition. We share the same religion. We share the same language. That's why, as you point out, the Founding Fathers were so central on having that shared morality, that shared belief in God, that bedrock, because without it, the words get very slippery very quickly. Justice to the Christian is not the same as justice to the pagan, nor should it be. They are distinct belief systems with distinct understandings. And when you lose that foundation, you're going to lose the ability to share that language. And so, again, that's why the Anglo and Protestant parts of American heritage are so important. Not that they are, again, exclusive, that no one can ever join, that no one can ever assimilate, but that you must assimilate. If you do not assimilate, if you are not speaking the language of the Protestant Christian, if you are not speaking the legal language of the Anglo and their understanding of the legal system, then those words won't have objective definitions to you, because you are not familiar with the foundations. You're not grounded in them. And this is why, again, a lot of conservatives were watching people get sworn in on Hindu holy books, these kind of things. One, two people who I'm sure are great people doing it isn't the end of the world, but the more and more people who aren't following Christ, who aren't grounded in that Anglo-Protestant understanding, the fewer and fewer people are able to share the definitions that we're talking about. So it's very important that the assimilation aspect moves people towards those foundations that ultimately allow them to understand the shared language that we're discussing right now.
Yeah, so well said. And and this, by the way, this whole conversation is not incompatible with the free exercise of religion, the right to believe, all of those things. It just means that our government is predicated on a belief system as well, on a worldview, on a vision for what a more perfect union means. It doesn't mean that we compel you to believe in God or to convert to Protestant Christianity before you can become an American or live in American society or even attain office, as Orrin mentioned. But it does mean that our law is predicated and grounded in a specific worldview and definition. And every other government system, by the way, is grounded in a worldview as well. It's not just American, and it's not just to say that because the First Amendment exists and protects our individual right, that somehow that means that our government must be secular. So we'll have to expand on that conversation at a later episode because we're already out of time. I keep telling Tim he's got to give me more than an hour in the morning because there's always so much to discuss. But Orrin McIntyre, thanks so much. And you can always reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net. Have a wonderful day.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast